It is 1 p.m., so we're going to get started because we have a ton of people here who are going to impart wonderful wisdom to you. I am Molly Mysick. I am a part of AIJ Nebraska. I'm a volunteer on their board of directors, and I also am a UX or UI designer at Kiewit. I forgot my role even. But thank you for coming to the UX UI design panel. I guess you didn't have a choice, really, but thanks for not sitting out in the other room, I guess. But yeah, so we're here with this wonderful group of panelists. We are really here basically to, there are their names, by the way. We're here to just talk about the importance of design, in particular UI, UX design, and maybe possibly clear up a little bit of like just misconception or some questions that you guys might have. We'll have time for an audience Q&A at the end, but really we want to give the panelists a good amount of time to introduce themselves, really talk about integrating UX UI into your workflow, and then also examples of some really great UX UI design. So without further ado, I will just hand it off to Anne-Marie to introduce yourself and then go down the line.
Hello, is it on? Yeah, it is on. All right. My name's Anne-Marie Weiner. You can remember it because it rhymes with designer. I'll be here for the next hour. And I'm a UX UI designer at Hayneedle.
Hello, I'm Tyson Reeder. I'm a senior UX designer at Mutual of Omaha.
Nicole Barneson. I'm a UX researcher with Molly at Kiewit.
I'm Trisha Gawley. I'm a senior designer at Woodman Life.
I'm Rob Ruiz, and I'm a full-stack WordPress developer at Orion Advisor Services.
All right, so thanks for the introductions. We'll just start, hold on, I'm gonna see if I can can you guys still hear me? Is that good? Okay. So we'll just start a little bit with what does user experience and user interface mean on your teams? I know that kind of, and for everyone who may be in the audience, there are differing levels probably of familiarity with UX and UI. I know in our group, there's probably differing levels of familiarity or understanding of what those terms actually mean. So really, in your day-to-day experience, just a couple minutes for each person to talk about what does that mean on your current team, and also, what's your process and what does your team really do well, as well as what are some room for improvement? And I know that's kind of a broad question, but whatever you want to kind of specify, really defining those terms in your team.
Okay, I'll try to remember all those things. So at Hayneedle, we work in an agile environment, if that's something people are kind of familiar with here. Yeah? Cool. So UX is integrated with these different project teams, but then we also work together as a UX team to form initiatives that we want to kind of push throughout the company. So we have UX, UI designers that work primarily on the site, so what you would see if you went to Hayneedle today. And then we have a UX researcher who does more of the behind-the-scenes work, conducting user studies, finding like different personas that we're trying to like tailor our work to, and then also conducting like in-person usability research. So, but day to day, our UX designers work with our developers on actually implementing like the designs that we've created, and then working with project and product management to help the business define like what it is that they are trying to solve. And then what were the other things we're supposed to talk about, Molly?
Oh, let's see.
What we do well.
Yeah, what do you do well? Where's room for improvement?
I think at Hayneedle, we've done a pretty good job of integrating within the rest of the technology department. It can be kind of tricky where sometimes developers don't think designers are speaking the same language, or they're not going to understand like what it is they are doing as developers. But like when you sit next to the people that you're working with every day, it's easier to build that relationship and like be truly integrated and kind of build that trust with the people that you're working with. And then as far as improvement, I think we can all do a better job of just trying to evangelize UX as something that people outside of UX and outside of tech consider, in their work and in their requests and the things that they're, like projects that they're trying to propose, to really be centered around like what do our users want and balancing that with the business needs. So I think that's kind of all of it.
Yeah,
Awesome.
that's great.
Okay, so at Mutual of Omaha, we have user experience designers. So, but then we're broken into interaction designers and visual designers. I would be a visual designer. Interaction designer would really focus on like research, user interviews, stakeholder interviews, creating personas, scenarios, all the way kind of up to like wireframes. But I'm with them like the whole time while they're doing that. So it kind of like the shift of then when it gets to wireframes, then kind of we whiteboard together. Then I take it into Sketch, maybe bring stuff into InVision for prototyping, for usability studies. So it's just kind of like this handoff where at the beginning it's very much interaction design, and then it moves into more visual designer role. But we're there together the whole time, as well as we have UX developers. And so they're, kind of setting things up, getting ready to, build the things that we're designing. So we're kind of in front of them designing, hand it over to them, and then the visual designer and interaction designer come kind of back in the when it's being developed to kind of help with the interactions, so like animations, and then also just kind of any kind of visual like cleanup. I'll get in the code quite a bit and kind of polish things up. What we do well, I think because it's broken into two disciplines, it's nice because we have some people that are just they want to just be doing the research, they want to be doing that kind of work, and then we have people like me that want to be doing, a little bit more of the visual, like polish and that kind of stuff. And so you figure out how to work with the person that you're paired with. And I think that's really cool because you kind of make it your own. Like if I really cared about being in on, the research from the beginning, I would be there, helping do the user interviews, maybe even doing some user interviews. So because we're paired off, we kind of figure out what works best for everybody. So that's really cool. Area of improvement. I think I echo what Anne-Marie said. Like, I think like UX is just so misunderstood by so many people. Just making sure people understand what it is, and that's one thing we run into a lot is from our interaction designer role. What is an interaction designer? Like so many people don't get it. But I think once they see us, doing the work, it starts to click a little bit more. But I think the more you can do research and stuff up front, the more you're going to save, time and money for the company. And so you'll just prove your worth more and more.
So I work at Kiewit with Molly. She's a UI, and I'm UX. Our team currently is split out into researchers and user interface designers. As researchers, we primarily focus on, right now, for example, we're focusing on 2019 initiatives. So the business will come to us and say, we have these different initiatives that we see that are a problem. As a researcher, I will go research those problems to validate if that problem does exist and what are the needs of that problem, kind of what would that entail. All this information is then brought to our stakeholders and presented, and they make the final decision of which projects will then be going forward. If the projects then go forward, we start looking at if it's an existing product data, then we'll drill down to do potentially surveys, contextual interviews. From that, we can build personas. We can do what's called mind mapping, so process mapping of what the users are going through. And sometimes there's no product that exists at all. So a lot of that would be looking at their existing process. What are their current process? Are they using Excel? What are their pain points? Gathering all this information, I'll work with Molly or other UI designers. They'll be on those interviews, and we'll go in and talk to those users, succinct up all that information, bring it back to the business team. The business makes the decisions of what areas they want to move forward with, and then Molly has an idea of like how to design. At Kiewit, we say no UX without UI, and kind of skipping forward. One of our struggles is sometimes people want to go to our UI team and say, can you make this for me? And they don't want to do the research up front. Research is not the funnest thing, I guess, to go through a bunch of data. It's not super exciting. I mean, I try to make it exciting, but And then we'll go into workshopping with the UI designers. So doing wireframing sessions, a lot of times we bring the business in, maybe a couple users in to kind of workshop around what that design is going to look like. Molly takes it, polishes it up, does a great job, kind of goes through her creative process, and then I will take that design and I will test it with usability testing. So yeah, I think did I cover everything?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
So I'm in a little bit of a different situation. So I'm on a very small team. It's my manager, me, and then a back-end developer. And so I wear many hats. And so I'm trying to do a little bit of the research, a little bit of the wireframing and prototyping, and then I also do the front-end coding, and then kind of pass it on to plug in the back-end. So timing is really short for everything that I have to get accomplished for a project. So that's probably one of the things that we could work on a little bit more, just getting more time to work on that research and making sure that we're implementing the right things at the right time and in the right manner. So I think, yeah, that's about it.
So at Orion, we don't really have UX, UI designers per se. It's kind of an interesting situation where our company's grown so fast that we end up having problems that need to be solved before we have people assigned to solve just that problem, I guess. So I suppose a lot of us there are a lot more like you, Tricia, where we're kind of wearing multiple hats. Many times the developers end up having to be designers, and not a lot of them are educated in design, I guess. So I guess a lot of our UI work is just done on the fly using frameworks like Bootstrap and such. And then as far as the UX side of things goes, we've only recently started performing research and whatnot based on user data, but that really hasn't been the responsibility of a UX person per se. A lot of that's been done by an innovations person that we have. And so our company's in a unique situation where we're starting to get to a point where we're realizing that we need somebody with just these responsibilities. So with that said, yeah, a lot of our UI stuff, I mean, we're using a lot of Angular, and we're using Angular to essentially quickly create, spin up ideas, I guess, that are working ideas. That's just at Orion. Now, me personally, I do a lot of work outside of my full-time job, and so as a WordPress developer, I think we're always faced with the challenges of trying to make user experiences that are specific to any particular client's niche market, I guess. And so that's kind of what I specialize in, having been a freelance WordPress developer for a while. Okay, so to get to the what we do good, what we don't do good. So we're really good at making things that are componentized and repeatable, so it doesn't take as much work to create new things that are almost the same as stuff that we've already done. So we save a lot of time there, which allows us to iterate through ideas and allows us to make changes relatively quickly, and that also add a lot of functionality. So that's good. What we don't do so good is obviously we need to have more people that are strictly like only responsible for UI or UX and spending more time doing the things necessary to do that properly.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, and I think that it's really helpful for people to kind of get a sense of what their current team structures are, and how you're incorporating research and design, or maybe where those improvements can lie. So, all right, so now we're going to do a little bit more of a fun thing. So each of these wonderful designer researchers, UX, UI professionals, has chosen an example of some really great UX design. So we can just kind of like go down the row again, but each of them will kind of come up, and I think we have a good diversity of truly what user experience can encompass. It can be small interactions, or it can be large, like human being experiences, marketing experiences, stuff like that. So yeah, I'll let you kind of step up and all right, talk about some Google Play.
Sweet. Yeah. So the example that I chose was Google Play for a few reasons, really, because one, it's Google's material design, which if that's not something that you've looked at before, you totally should, because they've got a great design system laid out with a lot of research behind it to be like usable but also look really nice. So, and I mean, this is a product that I use every day. So to be using something every day, it's got to be done pretty well, right, for you to want to keep coming back. But even just like, so this is their home, but you see right there, like you hover over and then you can see the rest of their menus, which is neat. But so like this home screen that you land on is really smart too. And I think what's cool about it is it's not just like a nice, clean, simple UI, but the experience of it is really smart too, because it knows like my recent activity. So like the things that I've listened to most recently, but then also what have I listened to on a Saturday afternoon before, like recommendations that way. And then as you keep scrolling, like it changes to these different sections. This I thought was super cool. It's newer, playing near you. So you can see like artists that are gonna be in the area, like coming up soon, which, yeah, it's shown me stuff that I had like no idea that, oh, they're gonna be here. Like, so that was really cool. But yeah, like new releases, that type of thing. So that's their, like, yeah. Yeah, so that's how you know, like that's one of their subtle indicators that you're shifting to a different section. And all of their like illustrations and stuff are really nice too, like festival season, okay, cool. Like, so that's neat. But then if you click into one of these, then you can see, oh yeah, I gotta actually click it. Then it shows you, so the artists that you can click into that way and get more information here. But I've also like been really impressed with how they build their radios that you can play. So like, say I wanted to listen to just Bruno Mars, then you can do that. Or you can also like start a radio that will, and I won't, because I don't think it'll play stuff. But then it gives you like similar artists and builds a radio station that they think you'll like. But yeah, so this is like, you can see their card design. So that's some progressive disclosure right there. Once you interact with it, then you get the other actions that you can take on that piece. So you have to hover to click it, or get that little info guide to show you their other options. What else did I want to show you? But yeah, so it's like it becomes super tailored to you as the user the more you interact with it, which is super smart, and obviously like a great thing for a user to want to come back is making those intelligent assumptions around like what I'm gonna want to listen to based on the day or the time of day or like where you are. That's super neat. It knows when I'm at the gym. It's like, okay, you want your like pump up rock station. I'm like, yes, I do, thanks. So I think that's pretty much it. Was there anything else I was supposed to talk about?
That's perfect.
Yeah. So yeah, Google Material Design, really cool for you to look at if you haven't before.
Okay, so mine, I kind of threw something quickly together in CodePen just to kind of show like a not as great experience and then a better experience. So let's pretend like you're logging in somewhere, you click in and you start going, your email address, or you're like, wait a minute, was that username or email? Wait a minute, let's see, Tice, wait, it's email, okay. And then, you fill out your password and you submit, but that could have been alleviated if we'd used like adaptive labels. So click in, username, okay. and then password. You have the context that's always there with you. The other thing is using colors that will pass ADA requirements, making things accessible for screen readers. So I just wanted to quickly kind of show, this is one of my pet peeves. It's getting better now that I use 1Password for everything, but when people have placeholder text for the label, it's really just a bad experience for everyone. So yeah, this really isn't that hard to do. It's just purely CSS. And I could, I kind of started from a CodePen and then modified it quite a bit to kind of show the different examples. So that's what I have for an example.
What's an example of a site that is really well known that uses that like non-adaptive, like just has a really bad login screen?
I'm really not seeing it as much
Yeah.
as I used to. So I think this is like getting out there and changing. Does anyone think? Can anyone think of one? I can't.
Material design started to adapt in a very similar pattern.
Okay.
Most of Google's products will use that. They use more of an inline field setup like that.
Facebook does it the bad way. All right, there we go.
Yes.
So yeah, they should get with it. That's Facebook. But yeah.
Apparently they get away with it. So.
Yes, they can get away with anything.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Nicole.
Okay, so I chose Disney because it's a magical experience. But what makes Disney a magical experience is even before you arrive at Disney. They send you this packet, they let your kids pick out the colors of bands that they want to wear, they ask you all these questions, so that when you get to Disney, they're managing that experience. What people oftentimes don't know is that Disney actually does use UX principles to build their parks. Specifically, the Magic Kingdom used a lot of UX principles to build their park. So as you go there, one of the things that can happen is you can say, oh, I want to go to the Princess line before going to Magic Mountain, right? You can go to Magic Mountain, buzz your thing, but they've already created a schedule. They're managing their crowds. They're managing where their users are going. They're managing your experience based on all this discovery research they did before you came to the park. And how the Magic Kingdom started is they started with feng shui, and then they moved into the UX principles for the Magic Kingdom. If you guys are interested in it, there's this great book. It's called The Design Behind Disney. It's kind of interesting. I kind of geek out on it. There's also one on Star Wars, too, so if you're interested in that as well, come see me after. But a lot of things go into this, and it's not just the experience of like going and being at Disney anymore. This experience starts from like right when you buy those tickets through the end, like when you're done. And throughout that whole experience, they're personalizing it. And I think that's something that we're seeing more as well, as people want things to be personalized to them. They want that personal experience. And I think a lot of challenges is trying to figure out how you give the user that personal experience. And I think a lot of that's done by looking at the user not only in the context of when they're on your site or in your location, but looking at the user in the full context of like, what are they doing before they go here, and what are they doing while they're here, what are they doing after? Like, look at the full experience of the user as you design.
Okay, so my example,
We can zoom in a little bit if you want. Sure. Yeah, or what are you thinking? Like that kind of
that's
thing?
fine.
Okay.
So my example is kind of a real-world example. So at my job, I have been doing a lot of landing pages for the last year and a half, and so I work with the advertising team, a writer, a print designer, well, print graphic designer, and then an SEO strategist. And so there's a lot of people that need to know what's going on across the campaign. And so this is kind of the journey map of the campaign itself. So we want to show everyone on our marketing team what's happening, when it's happening, and all of the parts and pieces in a high-level view. So this is kind of a breakdown by the weeks. So we'll have social posts as kind of a soft launch awareness for our campaign, and then week 2 we'll have a blog post integrated into that, and so then we'll show, okay, so if they click on a social post and it takes them to the blog, then where are we going to take them after the blog to generate leads or conversions? And so then we'll take them to a contact form or something like that. And then, so then for the lead generating, the second kind of phase after the hard launch is we'll add in display ads. So that'd be like banner ads and purchased advertising. And so we'll have different versions of that. So we'll have social posts and display ads that go directly to the contact form. And then we'll have 3 different versions that go to 3 different blog posts with different content in those blog posts or different topics. So that shows the whole team what's happening and when it's happening. And then I have kind of a more detailed version where the other people on the team can fill out the information like, okay, what social accounts are we using? Are we using our corporate account? Are we using like our sales director's account? Is he posting social posts from his own personal account, like LinkedIn? And then what's the content of those social posts? And then like for ads, what's the ad content? What does that look like for the designer? Because I don't make the ads, the graphic designer makes the ads. And how do we connect, and how does that make a continuity between what they're seeing and then what they're seeing in the ad and then what they're seeing when they go to our site or our landing page? And then same for the blog story. How does the blog story connect to the ad itself? So they're not getting that bait and switched kind of thing or being misled. And then what links, like links in the blog post itself? Are there like big buttons or ads on the blog page that take them to different places on our site or to the contact form? And so this is kind of more of a detailed view so everybody knows what's going on all in one area.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's great to, or I guess we can give it over to Rob. It's great to have that user journey mapped out as well, because sometimes it can really be intangible, when a person is actually, interfacing with what you built. So yeah, absolutely. All right, Rob, you ready?
Sure. Should I stand up there too, or?
Yeah, probably. Okay. Do we want to do the microphone to the?
You never got those.
No. No, we were having audio issues, so this is a video, but.
I don't know that it's that important that they hear the sounds. So.
Let's add something like.
If you can hear it, you can hear it. So essentially what you're looking at here is, this is what's called The Machine. It's by a company called, what are they called? Native Instruments, yeah. Duh. Anyway, so I like to make music. I do music production, and she asked me what the coolest user interface was, and so in my opinion, it's this on a multitude of levels, not only when it comes to the software that you use to compose the music, but also the hardware that comes with it and how they work in tandem with each other. I think probably the most difficult part of designing something like this is having to make whatever you're doing on this thing match up with what you're seeing on the screen real time, because there's a variety of modes and different situations, and there's like a whole bunch of stuff you need to do, but you only got one finite screen. So it's really good about making sure that it, and you can kind of see his screen off to the left, but essentially as he goes through and edits the sample that he just recorded of the tambourine, you can see that he's just using the controller to trim into a certain part of the sample so that he can isolate certain parts of the recording and separate them and assign the different parts to different buttons, essentially, is what he's doing. So I just thought that was, when I first started using it, I was blown away, because there's not many things that you're using, first of all, that have hardware and software combined, but also where a large section of the page has to be constantly aware of whatever it is that you're doing at that given time on this hardware, and constantly changing and allowing you to see what you're doing. And not only does it have screens on, not only does the application have a screen obviously on your monitor, but it's got screens on the device itself. And so it's like you got screens all over the place, buttons all over the place, dials all over the place. Honestly, like, user interfaces don't get more complex than this, in my opinion. And then you also, since it's music, I don't know, I think all the creative people out here know how important it is to achieve what's known as a state of flow when you're working on stuff, and music is no different. So not only do you have that challenge of all that stuff, you have to make sure that that user interface doesn't disrupt that state of flow, which is so essential for creativity, which is essentially what he's doing right now, is he's just creating something from scratch, just using a microphone and some application that's designed to take recorded sounds and chop them up and twist them around and move them around and allow you to play them back in different sequences and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's it in a nutshell, I guess. Is that's why I think this thing is so cool. If anybody wants to see it, like in actually working in front of them, I brought mine, and so I can set mine up after this if anybody's curious. If you want to take a break from the WordPress stuff or whatever. But yeah, it's pretty cool.
Cool, thank you. I also like, that kind of reminds me of like Rob and I were talking about, or Rob had also been talking about like the Creative Cloud interfaces in Adobe, and kind of there's been some debate back and forth about like, are those good interfaces? Are they hard to learn? Are they bad? Are they cluttered? And when you talked about the state of flow, that if you're making software or anything really, any tool for other people to create with and get them into a state of flow, how do you not disrupt that? And so it's like even more paramount sometimes for you to create that beautiful interface that people who are creating beautiful interfaces are going to use too, et cetera, et cetera. So, okay. Yeah, so then the final, I guess we'll do one more question until we hand it over to you guys to answer a few or ask a few more. But I think designers, I'll give this back to you. No feedback. So designers like to talk about like, you know, integrate designers into your workflow. Come on, like you need designers. And a lot of us can't really, or fail sometimes to articulate why that is so important, and or maybe we'll say why it's so important, but not the actual how. And so just taking some time right now to kind of give some tangible ways in which you can implement UI and UX into your workflow, as evidenced by our stories here and probably your real life experience. Sometimes it's a challenge, and there's not one way to do it. There's a lot of different teams. Teams are always changing. There's always room for improvement. It's definitely not static, but especially in terms of, you know, a lot of people here are working with WordPress, at least some of the time. And so, you know, I think just speaking from personal experience too, I think a lot of times UX and UI is over, especially the UX, the research part of it, is kind of looked over because of budget, timelines, et cetera. And so like how to deal with those constraints as well and still integrating that into your work. Yeah, how can we provide a little more clarity to people? That's a big, I like big questions, but.
All right. So I think being in an agile environment helps, because I'm able to kind of carve out that space for the UX process in larger projects. Because like as the UX designer on a project, I'm involved with the business and our product and project managers, like from the very beginning when they're starting to talk about what they want to do. So that's when I'm able to identify like, okay, this is something that's going to need some like upfront user research, and then we're going to want to test what we're already doing and find those pain points, that type of thing. So then, and we have like what we call our UX checklist just for our team internally, where we've got basically every UX or UI deliverable you could possibly create. And we'll go through that list and say, okay, I'm going to need this type of research, and then these wireframes, and then this usability testing. You know, so we go through and identify all of the things that we should be doing, and we break it down by priority, because obviously, like, with time and budget constraints, you're not always able to do everything that you want to do. But we call out, hey, these are the things that we must do, like absolutely have to have it, and then things that we should do, and then the things that, like, oh, it'd be nice to do if we've got time. And then that brings visibility to like project managers as they're laying out timelines for work, and then visibility to just kind of the business as a whole around, hey, this is the upfront work that needs to be done before we even start development. But then, does anyone here use Jira? Maybe people know what I'm talking about. Sweet. So that's our like task management system that we use. So I will quite literally like insert myself into that development task as well, because like I can see all of the developer stories that are going to have front end work done, and then I'm able to throw a subtask on there to say like design review for whatever this is. So that way they know like I'm expecting to see this and talk to that developer like as they're working on it. So that like I've got a pair of eyes on it. It's not just something that they can like develop and then pass off to a QA and assume that it's going to be fine. Like, because I've got that open subtask. So guess what? It's not done till I see it. Yeah, it's like my sneaky little way that I've figured out, but it's super efficient because, well, and it's helpful too with like tracking time and resources, because then like that sets the expectation for, okay, this is the designer involved with it, and like they're going to want to see that. Was that it? I feel like I just rambled a lot.
That was pretty thorough, I would say. Yeah.
Okay, so I think anybody can get into doing some sort of UX work by just, at the lowest common denominator, like put your design, put whatever you build out in front of a person. Try to find a person that matches, your user, who your actual end user would be. But if you're building it, you are not your user. And so you're biased to things. So there's a website called Usability Hub. You can go, and if you do other people's tests, they'll let you run tests. So you can do like quick click tests and preference tests. At Mutual, we use usertesting.com, which is quite a bit more expensive. You need like an enterprise license. But if you could, I think if you can get any sort of usability testing done and you show that video to someone in upper management, they're going to see the power in it. Because when you're watching someone frustrated about something you just put out there, like there's the conversation's over. Like it's like, okay, we need to do something. And so I think like a quick way of doing that is just take your design, create an account. I mean, if it's just it's Sketch, maybe you're throwing it in Vision, so now you have a clickable prototype. Go find somebody, put it in front of them, and say, give them a scenario, and then don't talk, and just see what they say. See how they're frustrated, what they're missing, and if they're like stumbling on something, you're like, oh, what are you thinking right now? I think that's how anybody can dive into usability research, and yes, that's on like the tail end. So it's better to do the research up front before you get there. But I think it starts the conversation. So I would say if you're designing or building anything, it should go in front of a user before you're pushing to production. And I think you'll learn a lot from that process.
Absolutely.
Oh, usabilityhub.com. Yeah, it's a cool one.
I think that's great advice. I mean, I worked for a lot of startups in my early days of UX, and I would go as far as, like, I know my users are potentially going to be in a coffee house. I would sit in a coffee house, and I'd be like, hey, can I, like, talk to you, buy you a cup of coffee? Little creepy, but guess what? They do it, and it's great. You get feedback. It's a good way to get research. Even just going out and having somebody test and using your iPhone to video record it. These are, like, really easy ways to go out, get feedback, take it back, and build that empathy. It's so important to build that empathy because once people see the struggle, they understand that things need to, what the reason behind why they need to change. As far as how we work at Qt, we are a consulting service, so we aren't a mandatory service. Not every product team has to use us. So when we're beginning with the UX UI team, there were some initial struggles. How we kind of got around those is we did something that's called a UCD, User-Centered Design Training, for just anybody who wanted to come. They could come to this User-Centered Design Training. We provide, it's kind of really interactive too. We make sure that they're going through a project themselves, kind of using the process themselves, also giving them and arming them the tools with not only to use our service, but feeling empowered to try to do some of this work on their own if we're busy at the time as well. How we work as far as integrating the UX UI team into our product teams is we work in Agile as well, and we implement what's called dual track Agile. So that means that they're actually writing user stories for us. So they'll write a UX story, they'll write a UI story, and they'll add points to us. So a lot of times there's that, oh, there's not enough time to implement this into my process. You can write these stories, and that's just part of, you're pointing it out, right, in your sprint to make sure that that time does exist. Essentially, too, we work 2 sprints ahead. So we're constantly ahead of the timeline. So when, we're in sprint 0, we're looking at sprint 2. So we're always working 2 sprints ahead of our team so that it's nicely packaged and put together. So when the specs are ready, so when they're ready to go, the developers can just kind of run with it. And yeah, we do the same thing, like as far as UI needs to check the deliverables, we write stories in for that as well, like just so that they have to go through that and to close it out, to close out the sprint. So that's kind of what we do. Yeah.
So at Woodman Life, we have a really big initiative right now on data-driven decisions and finding the data that is backing up anything that we're working on and doing. And so one of the things that I've recognized is we have all of our Google Analytics, I have the Crazy Egg heat tracking, and that's all the number data, but we don't have the why behind all of those numbers. And so I put together a business case for usertesting.com. So I'm hoping in 2019 we can get that. But really showing the why behind those numbers in our analytics is what I'm advocating for and working towards. So hopefully we can keep improving on that and showing that this is important and these are what the people that we're testing with are saying. And so we're not making decisions just because this is what we feel looks good or kind of just what we like or what colors we have preferences towards or whatnot. So still work in progress.
Can you repeat the question just one more time?
Yes.
I'm all the way at the end here, so you got to.
Basically, how can WordCamp attendees implement the UX UI process on their own teams? How have you seen it done on your team amid constraints, et cetera?
Google Analytics, period. Almost. So basically, A/B testing. If you don't know what A/B, I mean, everybody should know what A/B testing is. Do A/B testing. It's not that hard. There's actually plugins that make it easier for you to do A/B testing. You don't have to use a plugin, though. It could just be as simple as just creating 2 totally different pages that achieve the same thing, and then having them designed slightly different and randomly directing people towards one or the other. And that's not that hard to do either with PHP. You can literally just rand ID, give them whatever page. So if you want to test different ideas, A/B testing is the way to go. But obviously, Google Analytics, in my opinion, is just essential. It's super easy to add to any WordPress site. If you're not looking at your analytics, then you're not doing UX, period. So there's no reason you should even be here listening to people talk about it. You should be looking at Google Analytics all the time. If you're not looking at it at least once a week, you're doing yourself a huge disservice, especially if you already have it on your site. From there, you gather all the data necessary to put together good design options and good design choices. And I think what a lot of people get confused is the difference between UX and UI. And they think, well, if I'm doing UI, then I'm doing UX because they're experiencing the thing that I designed, right? And it's not exactly the same thing at all. Yes, you are designing stuff on a page. That's true. But the idea is you have to design an optimized experience, which, it's probably dumb to use the word experience when we're talking about user experience, but an optimized workflow that you would like to direct your customers or your users through in order to both achieve what that user is expecting to get from going to your site and also the purpose of your site, whether it is to make money or to inform people about an event or something. You need to make good choices that gives people what they need when they need it. And you can't do that without analytics and seeing who's going to what pages, where they're coming from. You need to know who your users are, what they expect, what type of people they are. If you don't know that, you can't make the right decision because there's obviously an infinite amount of ways that you can cut the cake. So there's obviously lots of cool tools that make learning and figuring that stuff out, like what he was talking about earlier. I personally don't complicate the whole process that much and use a whole bunch of crazy tools. I try to keep it pretty simple and just look at numbers. That's just me. I don't know. Maybe I just haven't been properly converted to other cooler ways of doing it. But yeah, Google Analytics and just trying ideas, being creative.
And I think a case could be made from, it's better to look at numbers than to look at nothing at all, and to be aware of who is engaging with your stuff. So I guess now is time. I feel like I timed this so well. Okay, this is exactly the time, 1:46. That's what I predicted. Exactly. It was 1:45, but Rob took a little extra time. Okay, so we're going to use this cool box. I'm not going to be the one to throw it. But Q&A. Okay. You're just going to, you're not going to throw it, are you?
Oh, wah wah. So where do you each go when you're looking for inspiration and ideas? Where do you get your creative fuel?
You don't have to hand it to me.
I mean,
Popcorn.
I go to Instagram.
Popcorn.
Is it on?
Oh.
I go to Pinterest. Actually, has a lot of great ideas around Instagram. I follow a lot of UX feeds. It's kind of interesting how much social media stuff you can find out there to get inspiration on different things.
Yeah, I'm gonna, I guess, give the answer that most designers would say you shouldn't give, but Dribbble has quite a bit of cool interactions and stuff like that. I think Pinterest is awesome, but then I think just paying attention to what's going on. If you're liking using an app, why are you liking it? What's going on? Because usually the best design is invisible. When you're just enjoying using an app, you're okay, if you take the time to think about why is that, then you might be able to dig into an interaction or something there. You have a mic.
I have another mic. So I guess my case, if I'm looking for inspiration for something specifically at work, I work at Hey Needle. We sell furniture and home decor things. So I'm looking at sites that do that really well. I really enjoy Article and Joybird that are these higher end, kind of more aspirational, inspirational sites. So they have that experience down, and it's really nice. But beyond that, it's also good to look at sites outside of your industry as well. So Nike does a lot of things really well. They've got cool experiences. But also, Instagram, following designers that just do cool stuff that you want to see. It's helpful to get outside of your box of what your daily role is and just find those weird things that just make you smile. And you can find that anywhere.
I also like to look at CodePen and just all the random pens that people are creating, and there's some crazy cool interaction stuff with either CSS transitions or GreenSock, and just some really awesome experience things coded out there that you can just kind of pick apart and see how they created it and then try to rebuild it yourself and have fun with it.
What she said.
He's the developer.
Break it, so that's good. I have two questions. but anybody's welcome to answer, obviously. Anne-Marie, you talked a little bit about adding subtasks and JIRA items to the engineering workflow. How do you manage design work in front of engineering in an agile environment? Do you also use JIRA, or do you use a different piece of software? And how do you make that easily transition as smooth as possible?
Sure. So we do use Jira for that upfront work as well. We have UX specific stories that follow a UX workflow, so they'll be tagged as, UX design or UX research, that kind of thing. We have our own little space for that. But then, once it's a development story that a developer is working on, that's outside of, the UX upfront piece. So that's why I'll throw a subtask on those stories so that I know it's tied to that specifically to keep track of, is it in development or testing or ready to release? Is there another part to that?
That was pretty much it.
Okay, cool.
And then I have a second follow-up. Sorry, I had two questions, but directed to two people. Tyson, you mentioned usability testing for Mutual, and my question for you is, how granular do you get in your tests?
I think that's a great question. I think it kind of just it's, I guess, what is the thing that you want to test? So you could have the whole design there, but then what you're testing is more specific. So if you're testing navigation, does someone know how to get to the right page? You might have the whole website, but then the task that you give them is hey, you're sitting down at a website and you need to find information about Medicare supplement insurance. Obviously, I work in an insurance company. And so then it's okay, do they know where to click? And even you could do tree tests before that to even learn, do people understand, how should you organize your navigation so that it matches what they're thinking? But yeah, I think you can get as granular, or you could have big, long, elaborate tests. But usually it's you have an idea of what is the thing you want to test, which is, yeah, and you can test the whole experience, or you could just focus in on that one little thing.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
Question over here.
Just curious what everyone uses as far as software or platforms or tools to do design work, wireframes, prototyping, and then how do you then present that across teams?
So we use Sketch. Some people are messing around with Adobe XD also. We have Abstract that is a version control for Sketch files, which is really cool, because then we have our design systems Sketch files in there, and it propagates out to all of our projects. But then InVision for prototyping, and then as far as sharing with other people, InVision's great for sharing because you can just send a link to them. But if you're talking sitting down with a developer to figure out how to build out what I had designed, everyone does have access to Abstract at Mutual, so they can get into my Sketch files and actually see the end product. I also think InVision has a great thing that they have it set up for developers where you can send your Sketch file through InVision into a developer interface where they can see the measurements and see the colors, so that a developer never has to get into Sketch. But yes, so Sketch, Abstract, InVision, those sort of items.
I'm pretty much exactly the same as Tyson. Our team works in Sketch. We've got our design system saved out in Sketch for symbols in a library, that type of thing. InVision is really nice for quick and fairly simple prototypes if you just need to be able to click through screens for someone to play around and understand your flow. Our researcher builds out our more detailed or a higher level of functionality prototype in Axure, which is what we use for our usability testing, because you can share those remotely with users, or we'll use them internally as well if we're bringing people in-house for in-person tests. And as far as sharing work, yeah, InVision is really great with their inspect feature. But then if it's a stakeholder or something and you think they're going to get too far down a rabbit hole, a lot of times I'm like, here's this mock-up of this one screen that I want you to look at because this is what we're talking about right now. Because you can get yourself in trouble if you share like too much without being there to set the context or like guide the discussion. So yeah, I've learned to be careful about oversharing sometimes.
Azure, the Microsoft cloud hosting?
No, it's called Axure.
Like an X instead of a Z.
Yeah.
Yep, it's RP, Axure RP.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Steve Ballmer's Azure?
No.
It's even more confusing when you're using Azure and Axure. So.
Point of clarification. Yeah. AXURE.
I'll go ahead and answer, but then we do have to wrap it up because we're like 5 till, and we have other talks planned. But I will say this. I think it's important to understand these tools and what types of companies they best serve, because some of these processes are very time-consuming and labor-intensive. And so I think for some larger companies that have more resources to put into this type of stuff, it makes sense to use some of these tools and some of these workflows to kind of get the best possible, optimal, I guess, planning phase, all the wireframing, all the different ideas you can throw at it, right? But for smaller companies, I don't think it makes as much sense to devote that much time and resources into doing it that thoroughly. And so I think for a lot of smaller companies, they need something that's a faster, probably not as efficient, but still productive way of doing things, because they need to just produce and keep up with what they're doing. It's tough because everybody kind of wants to do it perfectly and everybody wants to do it like the best way possible. But I think being realistic is also super important. And so, do you want to go ahead?
I'd also like to just add on to that, whatever program you feel most comfortable in is probably the program that you should just make your mock-ups in. Like he said, you don't have all the time in the world to perfect every little button and input. And so I still use Illustrator, sometimes InDesign. It depends on the type of project that you're working on, but ultimately whatever you feel most comfortable in and whatever program you know that you can turn around something fastest in is probably the best. And then one of my goals is like you make a stretch goal every year. I want to learn XD, so then, so if I can take a chunk of time, like 6 months or something, and spend whatever free time I have to learn that, then you can. Maybe your next project, if you have a little bit more leeway on your time frame, then you can experiment with the next program that you want to learn. But whatever gets the job done fastest, I think.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll let you guys go. Thank you so much. AIJ Nebraska is the Professional Design Association. Check us out, AIJ Nebraska, or nebraska.aija.org. If you want more information, we're always at these kinds of events, sometimes at these events. But thanks for listening.
And just real quick, in the sake of just being efficient, I'm just going to do some small closing remarks real quick right now. We're not going to have closing remarks after the last session, just because after it's done, you probably just want to leave. And hopefully come back tomorrow. Again, please join us at the after party at Beercade if you're into playing old school video games and possibly drinking some craft beer. And then obviously tomorrow we have a day full of very, very great stuff, including a workshop on how to develop custom Gutenberg blocks by the one and only Zach Gordon. So I don't know if you guys heard about that small little thing we're kind of doing tomorrow. Otherwise, thank you all very much for coming. Thanks to all of our sponsors. Please enjoy the rest of your day and all the talks. And thank you all for coming.